In this session, I want to talk a little bit about the typical timeline to implement an ISO 42001 program. And when I think about timeline, I think it's helpful to think about kind of a year-long implementation and certification process. Now, of course, I've seen companies do it in 6 months, and I've seen companies do it in 2 years. So it's a little bit variable. But if I'm just going to plan on average for a company, let's talk about a 12-month timeline and what does that look like. And some of the things I think about is planning. So just getting everyone engaged, that's probably a month or two. Doing the current state assessment we talked about during implementation, give yourself a month or two to do that. Then once you kind of know your gaps, you can build a project plan kind of in tandem with that current state assessment. And then give yourself 4 or 5 months to really implement the program, build all the policies, establish the governance structure, go through all the organizational change that you need to go through. And, from January to June or July, you can probably implement a program. So, 5, 6, 7 months, I think on average to implement an ISO program is pretty doable for most organizations. Again, if you have a huge complex organization, you can take longer. If you have a very small organization or you're just highly motivated to move fast, I've seen it done a little faster, but just on average, call it 6 months. And then what surprises people is how long it actually takes to go through the certification process. So on average for a year one certification, I would give yourself 5 or 6 months to get through that process. And here's why. First, you're going to need to select an external audit firm. So, give yourself a month or so to do that, sometimes 2 months, because you have to vet the audit firms. You have to go through the contracting process. Depending on how busy they are, you have to get on their schedule. So if you start doing that in July, maybe by August, you can go through that planning process with them and be complete. And then stage one typically happens after you engage with them. So let's say you did that in September. Then there's kind of this 30 to 45 day period between stage one and stage two. So if you did stage one in September, you'll wait a month or so, and then you could do your stage two sometime in the November timeframe. And then once you execute your stage two audit, there's typically 30 or so days for the audit firm to go through quality assurance and be able to give you a certification in hand. So it could be 5 or 6 months just to get through the certification process. And often when companies are planning for implementing a program, they think about how long it's going to take them to implement the program. And then they mistakenly think as soon as they're implemented, they can get certified the next month. But it's kind of a half and half process. So give yourself about 6 months or so to implement a program, and then maybe another 4 to 6 months to go through the certification process. And as you're thinking about how long this is all going to take you, let me help you think through some things that sometimes impact timeline. So number one is your current maturity. If you're already certified against other frameworks, you're very familiar with ISO, your organization's just deeply embedded in AI, those principles are natural, then maybe it'll move faster. But if you're starting from scratch and basically zero maturity, you have to build everything from scratch, it's going to take a little bit longer. So kind of self-assess right now. How mature are we? Are we ready to get audited? Have we ever even been through an audit before? The other things that drive timeline is the complexity of your organization. The size, are you one business unit? Are you several business units? Do you have one product, multiple products? How motivated is your team to do it? So you have all the leadership in one room and they're ready to go today versus you have to go through some organizational change to get people on board with it. How are you using AI? Is it something like OpenAI where you're just using an integration, or you're building a whole suite of AI products? Some of those things and that type of complexity will extend your timeline or make the timeline a little shorter. I'm going to talk about this in a second, but I also want to just encourage you to think about organizational change. Maybe you as an individual are highly motivated to pursue this certification, but who else in your organization needs to be involved? Do you need to get the executives involved, the CTO, the legal team? And do you have the clout internal to the organization to get everyone motivated to take on this project? And sometimes that just takes some time. They also might have competing objectives. Like if your whole product team is bogged down on developing something, have zero time to think about getting certified, you might only get a little bit of their time each week, and that will move the time a little slower. So just do an inventory across your stakeholders. Think about the urgency, the time everyone has to dedicate to this, and how motivated your organization is to do this from a business perspective. How strong is the business case to do that? And that'll help you kind of level set on timeline and how long that might take. The last thing I'll leave you with is kind of the biggest barrier that I've seen to doing a project like this efficiently is organizational change. And the number one thing that you really need to get any program off the ground is executive sponsorship. So I would encourage you to go back to the original video when we talked about the business case and really think through, is there a really sound business case for my organization to pursue a certification? And can I articulate that business case to leadership to get their buy-in? And I think if you can get leadership buy-in and you can get the whole organization behind this project, that'll take you so far and so fast. So don't skip that step. Don't try to make it a one-person Herculean effort. Really get your team behind it. As you other things I think about is as you engage this project, always do a formal project kickoff. That sounds very basic, but getting everybody together, doing an orientation session about why you're doing this and what they're doing, and the expectations and roles for each team member, that just goes a really long way. At Risk 360, we do orientation sessions. So it's kind of like this course, actually. It's about an hour long where we'll sit down with all the stakeholders and just say, hey, look, this is why we're doing it. Here's the business case for you guys doing this. Here's the problem statement. Here's the desired future state. Here's everyone's role, so you know exactly how you're working on the project, expectations, and that just kind of gets everybody on the same page, feeling really good that they understand the why behind taking on a project. So really consider those orientation sessions. We also document a RACI diagram for the roles and responsibilities. So some big things like who's the sponsor of the project, down to little things like who should be included in a communication if we're doing a weekly status report. So just going through and defining all the roles that you need and making really clear who owns each of those roles and who needs to be involved. That has been a really big difference maker for us in terms of project success and project speed. And then the last thing I'll encourage you to think about is just a cadence of status reporting. So at Risk 360, we have this thing called Status Report Friday, where every Friday our team sends internally and to clients a status report on the projects that we're working on, just to make sure that everybody has the same exact set of information and feels really good about the risk of the project, the timeline of the project, and what's coming up next. If you're using Full Circle or GRC platform, we actually can automate those status reports and you can log in and see a dashboard for yourself in real time. So that helps a little bit. But even if you're not using a GRC platform, thinking about what that cadence should look like and what information should be included. And I think that stuff will really help you drive organizational change. So I hope that helps, gives you some context if you're planning on the timing, what drives timing, and some of the things to help you through the organizational change process. And I am looking forward to speaking with you in the next session.